Alright, today I'm going to show you how to make a little pin cushion. This is a great project. You're going to learn how to do many skills with this project, practice some things, but also it has a great purpose, right? We keep our pins in it. So if you sew, you have to have a place to keep your pins. This helps you keep them. You can grab them and never stab yourself. When you take them out of your sewing projects, they go right in there. And this little piece here is filled with sand. So if you make a little add-on on yours filled with sand, that is designed to sharpen your needles. So I squeeze it tightly and then push my needles in and out over and over like a knife sharpener, right? And the pins and needles will be sharpened. All right, so the other reason I love working on this project is that this does a very strong stitch. And you can use that stitch for making pillows. It's the same process as making a pillow or a stuffed animal or even some clothing, right? The construction process will be very, very similar. You're going to practice measuring, you're going to practice clipping corners or curves, something like that, whatever, depending on your design is. Okay, these are all the different kinds of pin cushions that you can choose from. So of course we have the original, right? And comes with the little sand strawberry on the side. And then you have this one. This one's the basic one where you just have two pieces of fabric and we're gonna sew them together around the outsides, right? Inside out we'll sew. So this is the one that's basic. You can play and do a different shape, same kind of thing. This is a student sample. Two pieces of fabric, but you can tell around the curves and the corners it gets a little funky, so I'm going to address that in the project directions. Then you have some advanced ones, so if you want to add a third piece, you can go ahead and do that. This is circle, obviously, and then this is a cube type shape, and I'm going to show you how to do some tufting too, so that in the middle it gets pulled real taut and it kind of looks like a princess pillow, something like that. And then you could always do these really fun shapes like a strawberry. This is adorable. Okay, so you have your choice of which one you want to do, but this is the original basic project that everybody is required to do. Okay, here's a few of the things you'll need to get started. You'll need your fabric, of course. And you'll need some kind of ruler. These are some great clear quilting rulers, but I bet you could use a regular ruler. I'll need my needle that I kept in my needle book. This is from another video. And I'll need some stuffing to go inside it. This is the actual pin cushion that we'll make without the decorations. And I'll need some pins. I'll need my scissors, of course. And you'll need something to mark your fabric with. So you can use traditional tailor's chalk. A pencil works excellently. And there are these great Frixion pens that erase with iron. Oh, in class we use these a lot because we can take away the marks. And I never use a Sharpie. Okay, the other thing you can use to mark is an old piece of soap. So I had this small piece of soap. It was broken up and old. And what I did was I let it dry out. I made sure it was a skinny piece and I let it dry out for a couple days. And then I'm able to mark on fabric with it very easily. So this is another very traditional way for marking. All right. So the same steps that we'll do with a pin cushion, you can do with so many projects. This is a coaster that I made with the same exact shape and the same process. And instead of stuffing, I put a layer of batting in the middle. But this is a great place to use old clothing, socks, something like that. The other thing I like to do with something like this is to make them even smaller and make them into reusable makeup wipes. Let me know down below in the comments if you want a video to see some reusable products. The same process goes for this elephant that we'll do later on in class too. Okay, and really any stuffed animals. All right, so your first step is to get your fabric ready. Make sure that it's well pressed and ready to roll. And what we're gonna do is cut a piece, and this measurement does not matter so much for the project. This one that I have completed is probably about 4 inches square when it's finished. So that means I have to add on an extra 1/2 inch for both sides. So it would start off as a 5-inch square and end up being this size, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and press my fabric, and I'm gonna cut 2 squares about 5 inches each. Okay, I have my pieces cut and ready to roll. If you don't have an iron at home, a great way to get your fabric smooth is to bring it in the bathroom while everybody takes a shower and just leave it there, and then by hand smooth it out after that, because the steam will soften it. You can also wet it and smooth it out by hand. You might have to do it a few times before it gets smooth, but I know we're all home right now, so thought I'd give you that choice. So the steps go like this. You're gonna cut it and then mark the stitching line. Then you pin. These 2 things, actually everything must be done in this very specific order, because if you pin before you mark, you'll be marking crooked lines. The pins make the fabric bumpy or wavy, so you would be marking inaccurately. So make sure you mark first, then put the pins in just like this. Then we'll do the sewing, then turn it inside out, flip it, and fill it with stuffing. And then you finish this edge here, and I'm going to show you a special way to do it in pink. So this is your pin cushion, right? And you're going to sew from here all the way around to the other side. Leave some open. I leave about 2 inches open, close to 2 inches. And I do not like to start on a corner. When I start on the corner, I feel like I'm adding extra work for myself. It's not as accurate, all kinds of things. So I never start on a corner. So I start here, and I'm gonna make these stitches fairly small, and then I'll just sew regular back stitch all the way around here. And again, kind of lock it, knot it a little bit smaller right here, maybe do an extra couple of stitches. This part in pink is called a seam allowance. Okay, so that means it's from the stitch line to the edge of your fabric. That section is called a seam allowance. And every pattern that you make will be specific, or you design it and you add in a specific seam allowance. For this project today, it's a 1/2 inch. The seam allowance is a 1/2 inch. That means the stitching line must be a 1/2 inch away from the edge of your fabric. And it has to be consistent all the way around. So that's why we're going to go ahead and mark it very specifically. For quilting, a 1/4 inch is your standard seam allowance. For clothing is 5/8 inch for most home sewing. Okay, so check out your clothing. Look how wide the seam allowance is. They are made differently when you buy clothes that are mass produced versus couture. So check out the different qualities of clothing that you have at home and start looking at your seams and see what they look like. All right, so let's go ahead and do the marking right now. I have my flat pieces, and again, I love these clear rulers because I can see this is my 1/2 inch line where I taped it up, and I can see I just put the fabric edge at that 1/2 inch line, and that helps me mark it. Okay, here I can see it completely, exactly lined up. And then I'm going to take my Frixion pen and I'm going to mark. Oh, that one didn't show up. Oh, might have to use a pencil. Let's see the difference. This is great. There, pencil's very easy to see. The pencil does wear away sometimes, so if you're doing a project that you need your seam allowance to last a long time, I don't like to use pencil. Like embroidery, I don't use pencil for that. So I only need to mark one side of my project because I can see, I only need to see one side. All right, so I have all that marked. This is where I'm going to leave open. and I'm gonna do the next step. The next step was to pin them. So now I'm gonna pin them inside out. Right sides together, raw edges even. Over and over, you're gonna hear me say that. Right sides together, raw edges even. So that means the good side, which is the right side, are together, they're kissing. Right sides together. Raw edges even means all of these outside edges that are raw edges, right, unfinished, they're ratty and fray, they're all gonna be evened out, right? I'm gonna do that. And then I'm gonna take my pins. I have some really cute pins from Hobby Lobby. And I just put them in and then out so that everything lays flat. Sometimes I do them cross-directional just so that they keep everything very stable, okay? All right, so the next step is I'm gonna sew. I'm gonna need to get my needle and thread ready, and I'll show you how to do back stitch. Okay, just a quick timeout. I wanna go over the stitches that we learned so far. In the last project, we did running stitch. You have these diagrams if you're in my class. These are pretty easy to find on the web too. So this was running stitch, how it went in and out, in and out. You can see it on the back and the front. There are gaps in between. This is also used for basting. You're gonna need to know that for later on. Basting, which is temporary stitching. So when I open it up, there's not a lot of gaps on the nicely stitched ones. On the larger, which is used for basting, you can see there's lots of gaps. This is a loose stitch. It's also used for gathering because check this out. When I pull on it, it gathers up, right? So would that be good for clothing or this pin cushion or a stuffed animal? Absolutely not. This is just for lots of felt, or it has very specific uses, but it's not very strong, right? We also used buttonhole stitch, which is this edge one on the edge of the needle book, and you can do it small, large. You can even do it right next to each other, and it would actually be the buttonhole, kind of like what's on your jeans, right? This is also great for felt when you're making Christmas stockings or some fun, cute felt projects. Okay, so we've done those two. Today we're gonna work with back stitch. Back stitch is your money. This is a great strong stitch. It looks like this on the front or back, and you would never want this to show on felt. So I would not use this on some place where the stitches were gonna show. What I always do is work right sides together, raw edges even, and I stitch and then I turn it inside out and the stitches are nearly invisible. Right, so this is the stitch you're gonna use today. You go back and come out in front, back and come out in front. I'll go over it right now. Okay, back stitch. So I have my piece, it's all ready. I have my needle and thread with a knot at the end. And I'm just gonna start, doesn't really matter where, go all the way through my fabric and come out about a 1/4 inch away. Then I'm gonna go backwards with my needle and divide that in half, about halfway in between. And then I'm gonna come out again about a 1/4 inch away from where my needle went in. See, I think it looks like a T when I do this. It goes across and everything's going through the back. All right, let me do that again a couple times. You can watch. And here I'm just gonna go right into where my stitch was because now they're a good distance apart. Just the first one. And honestly, I noticed it doesn't matter too much if you go halfway in between or all the way back. Just as long as you're not leaving much more than 1/8 of an inch in between every place the stitching is, okay? At the corner, I'm gonna make sure I come up at the corner very specifically or go down at the corner, something. That corner spot needs one stitch for sure, no matter how small or large. And then here, I'm gonna come back to come out in front again. And then keep going. Come back to come out in front. I'm only using dark thread because I'm showing you all. I would only use yellow thread if this were my project. Maybe yellow or white. Go back and come out in front. I'm going to go all the way around. Remember, never start on a corner. Can you see why I only had a mark on one side? I'm never flipping it over this whole time. I'm only working from one side. Okay, and make sure you do your stitches where you go down and come back up all at once. There is another method where you would stab through, but we're not going to use that this time. I did have to change my thread about halfway through, and I had to make a knot. And it's the same as what I'm going to do right now to finish, so I'll show that to you. When I come up to the end, I like to make it a little bit stronger. I do that at the beginning too, where I kind of just lock my threads. I might do an extra stitch. So right here, I'm going to do an extra stitch. It's tiny, just to kind of lock it in a little stronger so it doesn't open up while I'm turning it. And then here I'm going to make my knot. So it's the same knot as I taught you in the how to thread a needle video. And here's the advantage is you can wind it right here, and then you can push it all the way through. See how my left hand is pulling as I did that? I pull all the way through, and then my knot is right there, okay? So I'll show it to you one more time. I'll do a knot in the exact same place. Even though I don't need it. You don't need to do more than one. So I wind it, and the left hand is doing a lot of the work. The left hand is pulling, and then I can go right through. This will really pay off on later projects, learning that knot. You can always just cut it and snip it too. All right, a couple things. Here's how you know your stitches are good. When you open it up, they will be just about invisible, and there'll be no gaps. So this side is good. This side I did bad, just to be able to show you. When I pull on it, see how it opens up? Right, you don't want any of those puckering gaps to open up because obviously stuffing can come through. It's just kind of useless, right? This is not good. So when I check on it, let's see. This is what I would do in classes. I would check on your stitches. And again, I use dark blue thread, but you can barely see it. If I had used yellow, it would be completely invisible. Right, all over, check them all. Pull on them a little bit, make sure they're strong, right? All right, and then I'm gonna go ahead and do the next step. The next step, let's check where we were up to. So I did the sew, and now I'm at turn. There is kind of an in-between thing here. What I'm gonna do is clip the corners. I'm gonna cut straight across just so that all of this bulk will not be in my project. It kind of clogs up the corners and doesn't let them look very sharp. Notice how we sewed it at a perfect 90-degree angle with a ruler and everything. So when you turn it inside out, your corners should be nice and sharp. Do not cut your stitches. Do not cut your stitches. I don't know if you guys got any knots while you were working in here, but if you did, they're not going to show. So I would just either leave it there or it's just never going to show, so I wouldn't even bother. Sewing is one of the most forgiving things that I've ever done, and that's probably why I love it so much, right? All right, and then you turn. So turn inside out. I clip the curves, turn it inside out gently. If you're not gentle, you might rip the stitches. And then I'm going to poke out my corners. To poke out my corners, I like to use a blunt pencil or the tip of my scissors if they're not too sharp. And again, just very gently, just poking out my corners. They were 90 degrees, so they should be pretty nice and clean. Looks good. So it's all the way square. Go ahead and get your stuffing. And we'll get our stuffing ready for the next step. At this stage, I would probably iron it. Maybe even iron it before I turned it inside out. If you want to talk about best practices, this is just a little simple pincushion, never going to be washed or anything. But if you were making a pillow or anything else, you would probably want to iron it. So here's the difference if you iron it versus not ironing it. This one's not been pressed with the iron after I sewed. This is a little poofy, this sticks up. This one's been pressed with the iron and you can see it's super smooth. Right, flat. So what we usually do is I would sew it, right? This is my seam line. This is my seam allowance. I'm going to sew it, press it right here one time, and then I open it up and press it again open. I like to push my seam allowance towards one side. Some people open it up and split it. There's a lot of ways to handle the seam allowance when you've finished. But for this project, I just push it to one side, iron it flat. You can even finger press these while you're doing it, and it'll make a huge difference in your finished product. All right, here we go, stuffing talk. So this is how the stuffing comes in a bag. If I just jammed it in my project, it would have all these lumps and bumps that are still there. So our next step is to fill. And what we have to do with stuffing is kind of break it apart into the fibrous bits, right? So it takes a little bit of extra time, but it's really worth it, especially with larger projects when you want everything to be smooth and fill the shape that you've created rather than just have these lumps and bumps, okay? So you take little pieces, about a handful, and you're gonna break it apart. This is a great place to use old clothing or old blankets, old socks, clean them first, and use that for stuffing. Old fabric or bits of fabric that you have lying around that you're not going to use. But this is a great place to utilize it. So you're going to break it all apart and then we stuff it in. So even though it takes a little bit of time, it is definitely a best practice that will make a better looking project. And jam it well into those corners. A lot of the stuffing bags come with this thing called a stuffing tool, but I'll tell you a secret, it's really only a chopstick, a single chopstick. So go ahead and get one out of your kitchen. You can always use the eraser end of a pencil, or some long tweezers, and you just want to jam it into the corners, okay? So take your time, go ahead and stuff your project. All right, here we go, very last step. This is called ladder stitch. If you Google some images, it looks very much like a ladder, and it reminds me of shoelace, right? So here's where I put that little bit of extra small stitch and it stayed together a little bit better. The first thing I like to do is push the stuffing out of the way. Especially if I were to close this on the machine, that's how you do it. You push the stuffing out of the way and then you can work with this very flatly. And then of course you let the stuffing come back to life after you're done. You can pin it, you don't have to. I have my thread and I'm going to hide my first knot on somewhere where it won't show. It doesn't really matter where, but I need to come up right there. I'm never going to let this show on the outside. So when I push through, I'm never going to push all the way through like that. I'm only going to be on this edge. So if we were on a mountain or something like that, this would be the very tip top, right? And that's where I'm going to work, but only on the inside layer. And I just go side to side, back and forth. And I'm going to go kind of sideways. So I grab a little bit on that top edge. Repeat this about 3 or 4 times. Ooh, little knot. There it goes. One more. So that whole time I never went through to the outside. Now when I pull on it like a shoelace, it should just tighten up smoothly. Again, if this were yellow thread, it would be next to invisible. I don't want to pull it so tight that it bumps and makes lumps. Just kind of flat, nice and gentle. Okay, do that the whole way across. I'll show you one more time. Any problems I see usually come when we try to take too big of a stitch or do too many at once, things like that. So don't go too far apart. This is worth taking your time on, because as you use it, you won't even be able to tell which side was finished or closed like this. They'll all look identical. What was the name of this stitch again? Do you remember? Good, and then I pull it just like that. All right, very end, it's all sealed up. I need to make a knot. And this is where knowing that quilter's knot is gonna come in handy. So I'm gonna wind it around a couple times, mostly using my left hand, see that? And then I'm gonna dive back in where it won't show. I can come out anywhere because the knot is on the inside. So what I do is I'm going to snip that off. The knot is on the inside. And then poof, goes away. And that edge will flatten out some more so that they will all look identical. Remember, you're going to make sure to use matching color thread. The last thing I want to show you as a bonus is how to do a little tufting. You will need to add 2 buttons to this project just to practice, but that is a totally different video that you'll be able to watch, because you'll probably use that one again and again a little bit more. Oh, okay. I'm gonna need a thread, and actually don't knot the end. So I don't knot the end. And what I do is decide where you want your tufting. If you were gonna make rows of tufting, you would mark them off. But I'm just gonna do one right in the center so it kind of looks like a princess pillow. Go down and then come back through. No knot. And now I have 2 ends of thread. Neither one is knotted, right? And I'm gonna just tie a simple knot right here one time. But I need to pull it tight, but not so tight that it snaps. So I push, 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 tie a knot. Let's see, is that tight enough? That's very nice. I want it a little bit tighter though. As soon as I let off pressure, it comes undone. So I need to make sure I can get that second knot in there to secure it much better. All right, tight, 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 tight. Now I'm gonna make a second and a third knot to secure it so it'll stay right where it is. Any pressure will reduce your tufting, so don't let the pressure off. There it goes. Right, that's it. Maybe an extra one just for good luck. Right, there's my tufting. Super cute little princess type pillow. Here's a spot where you could just add a button right on top. You could even use this thread that's here already to add a couple buttons and secure it a little better, and then it's just so adorable. So that's your tufted pillowcase, 100% done. I'm gonna snip these threads. Right, and that's what it would look like finished. You could put something cute in there, a button or some kind of cute charm, whatever you can find. Notice the corners are very squared off. Okay, make sure you use these steps. This was finish. And make sure you clip the corners before you turn inside out, turn it gently, all those wonderful things, all right? Thanks for watching. This is the exact same project. So it's gonna be a placemat, but it could also be a pillow. I had the 2 squares of fabric, sewed them together most of the way around, never started a corner. So this is open. I'm gonna clip all the corners so that when I turn them inside out, it won't be all full of stuff in that corner, right? I'll clip all 4, and then I'll have this. I turn it inside out, the corners poke out nicely. I can reach in and poke them out even better. So this, I'm going to close up this opening here and iron it flat. I'm going to do a stitch line around the whole perimeter of the quilt, and it'll be a placemat. I could also fill it with stuffing and it would be a pillow, right? If I had a different type of opening here, if I left it open a little more, it could be a cute bag. I could attach some kind of strap, right? It's a very rudimentary type bag. You could put a snap, buckle, all kinds of things, right? And this is really the basis of your stuffed animals that are to come too.